The tape recorder is running March 15th, 1973. A basement room at the Pentagon. No windows, no official record of this meeting. Just 6 men and a tape recorder that isn't supposed to be here. Major General Robert McKenzie sits at the head of the table. He's just returned from Vietnam, final tour. He commanded air operations in 3 Corps for 18 months, oversaw 2,847 napalm strikes. Now he's being debriefed by a special committee. Not official, not public, just internal assessment. The committee wants to know, did napalm work? Did it achieve military objectives? Was it worth the political cost? McKenzie has spent 3 weeks preparing his response, reviewing strike reports, analyzing casualty data, interviewing pilots and ground commanders, compiling statistics. He's talked to 63 pilots who flew napalm missions, interviewed 42 ground commanders who conducted post-strike assessments, reviewed 1,963 detailed casualty reports, cross-referenced with Vietnamese hospital records, compared targeting intelligence with ground truth. He has the answers, and they're not what anyone wants to hear. The tape recorder sits on the table. One of the committee members, Colonel James Walsh, brought it, said they should document this, keep a record for future reference. McKenzie said, fine, let it run. What McKenzie says in the next 47 minutes will stay classified for 35 years, until 2008, when a researcher finds the tape in a mislabeled box, transcribes it, realizes what she's found, and releases it, because McKenzie doesn't give them the sanitized version, doesn't give them the official narrative. He gives them the truth, the numbers. The reality, what napalm actually did versus what it was supposed to do, and he gives them names, specific villages, specific strikes, specific examples where what he was told was a military target turned out to be farmers in a rice paddy. And what the tape reveals, what McKenzie admits in specific detail with mathematical precision, will prove that the US military knew exactly what napalm was doing, knew the civilian casualty rates, knew the military effectiveness rates, knew that what they were telling Congress and the public was a lie, and continued operations anyway, for 8 years, while documenting the truth internally and presenting fiction externally. This is the story of what General McKenzie said on that tape, the numbers he presented, the villages he named, the pilots he quoted, the conclusions he reached. And why his assessment was immediately classified and buried for 35 years. If you want more stories about the truth that gets hidden, the admissions that never make it to official reports, the numbers that contradict the narrative, the evidence that proves everyone involved knew, hit subscribe right now. Because McKenzie is about to say things that will end careers if they become public. Things like, napalm killed approximately 85,000 Vietnamese civilians during my 18 months of command, compared to approximately 11,000 enemy combatants. That's an 8.1 civilian to military casualty ratio, and everyone in this room knows it. We've known it for years, and we've been lying about it to Congress since 1965. The tape is rolling, and McKenzie is about to tell them everything. 3 weeks earlier, February 22nd, 1973, Andrews Air Force Base. McKenzie arrives back in the United States, his final rotation from Vietnam, 18 months commanding air operations in the 3rd Corps. He's exhausted. He's seen things, done things, ordered things, things that keep him awake at night. He's met by Colonel Walsh. They've known each other for years. Walsh says, "General, welcome home. Secretary wants to debrief you. Informal assessment. What worked, what didn't. Lessons learned for future operations." McKenzie. "When?" Walsh. "You have 2 weeks to settle in. Then we'd like you at the Pentagon. Compile your thoughts. Bring data if you have it. We want your honest assessment. McKenzie. Honest? Walsh. That's what the secretary asked for. McKenzie thinks about that. Honest assessment. Does Walsh understand what that means? Does the secretary understand what McKenzie's honest assessment will contain? Over the next 2 weeks, McKenzie does something he shouldn't do. He makes copies of classified strike reports, post-strike assessments, casualty compilations. He's supposed to have left all classified materials in Vietnam, but he made copies, personal copies, kept them, because he suspected he'd need evidence. He compiles 180 pages of analysis, every napalm strike under his command, every post-strike assessment that was conducted, every discrepancy between what intelligence said the target was and what ground units found, every civilian casualty that was classified as enemy because of where they died rather than who they were. He organizes it like a prosecutor building a case, because that's what this is. A case against the weapon he was ordered to use. A case against the targeting system he was ordered to trust. A case against the casualty classification system he was ordered to accept. March 10th. McKenzie's home in Virginia. His wife, Margaret, finds him in his study at 0300 hours. He's been up all night, working on his report. She says, "Bob, you need to sleep." He says, "I need to finish this." She looks at the papers spread across his desk. Reports, statistics, photographs. She picks up one photograph, sees burned structures, sees bodies, says, "What is this?" He says, "Tan Phuong village. We hit it February 8th, 1972. Intelligence said enemy staging area. Ground assessment found 47 dead civilians, 3 weapons, no military equipment. Intelligence was wrong, or intelligence was lying. Either way, we killed 47 civilians." Margaret, "And you're going to tell them this?" McKenzie, "I'm going to tell them all of it, every village, every mistake, every lie, because if I don't, who will?" Margaret, "Bob, this could end your career." McKenzie, "My career is already over. I'm retiring in 6 months, but this..." He gestures at the reports. "This needs to be documented. Someone needs to say it, on the record, even if they classify it, even if they bury it. Someone needs to tell the truth about what we did over there." She sits down next to him, says, "What did we do over there?" He says quietly, "We burned villages. We killed families. We called it war. We called them enemy casualties, but I've read the reports. I've seen the ground assessments. Most of them were just people, farmers, families. Wrong place, wrong time. And we dropped napalm on them, and then we lied about it." Margaret, "Are you sure you want to do this?" McKenzie, "I'm sure I have to." March 15th, 1973, 1400 hours, Pentagon basement, 6 men at the table, Major General Robert McKenzie, 52, Air Operations Commander, 3rd Corps, Vietnam, just rotated home, career officer, 28 years service, decorated, respected, tired, determined. Colonel James Walsh, 48, Special Assistant to the Secretary of Defense, running this assessment, recording it without official authorization, knows this is going to be explosive. Colonel David Foster, 45, Air Force Operations Analysis, numbers man, here to verify statistics, skeptical that McKenzie's numbers can be accurate. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison, 42, Army Ground Operations, here to provide ground perspective. Served in Vietnam 1969 to 1970, conducted post-strike assessments, knows McKenzie might be right. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, 39, Intelligence Analysis, here to provide strategic assessment, worked at MACV headquarters, saw the intelligence that authorized strikes, knows the system is flawed. Major Richard Chen, 35, Legal Counsel, Here because someone thought they should have a lawyer present, just in case McKenzie says something that crosses into criminal territory. Walsh starts the recorder, says for the record, March 15th, 1973, 1400 hours, internal assessment of napalm operations effectiveness, 1971-1972, General McKenzie presiding. Then Walsh looks at McKenzie, says, General, you've reviewed 18 months of napalm operations under your command. What are your findings? McKenzie opens his folder. Inside, 180 pages of analysis, statistics, strike reports, casualty assessments, post-strike ground evaluations, pilot debriefs, medical reports from Vietnamese hospitals, photographs, village names, dates, grid coordinates, everything he could compile. He doesn't read from the report, just speaks, direct, clear, brutal. McKenzie. Napalm is a terror weapon that occasionally kills enemy soldiers. That's my finding. We've been using it as a precision strike weapon. We've been telling Congress it's highly effective against military targets, but the data shows it's primarily killing civilians. The ratio is approximately 8-to-1, 8 civilians dead for every confirmed enemy combatant, and that ratio has been consistent since 1965. We've known about it since 1965, and we've been lying about it to Congress since 1965. Silence, complete silence. You can hear the tape recorder humming. Walsh. General, that's a serious allegation. Can you substantiate that ratio? McKenzie pulls out a document. This is a compilation of post-strike assessments from ground units. For 18 months, January 1971 through June 1972, my command authorized 2,147 napalm strikes in the 3rd Corps. Of those, 1,163 strikes had post-strike ground assessments conducted within 72 hours. The other 884 strikes occurred in areas we couldn't access for ground assessment. Too hostile, too remote, or terrain didn't allow it. He reads, total confirmed casualties from those 1,163 strikes, 96,247 bodies counted and documented by ground units. Of those, military-age males with weapons or military equipment found nearby, 11,034. That's 11.5%. Civilians, women, children, elderly, or unarmed males in areas with civilian structures and no military equipment, 85,213. That's 88.5%. Ratio 7.7.1 civilian to military. I round to 8.1. Foster. General, those numbers can't be right. That would mean we're killing 8 civilians for every enemy soldier. That's not possible. Our targeting procedures require confirmed enemy presence before authorization. McKenzie. That's the procedure, yes. But I'm not telling you what the procedure says, I'm telling you what happened. These numbers are from ground unit reports, from soldiers who walked the strike zones, who counted bodies, who looked for weapons, who documented what they found. He pulls out another document. I verified these numbers personally. I didn't just accept the compiled statistics. I randomly selected 400 strikes from the 1,963 with ground assessments. I pulled the detailed ground unit reports. I read every single one. 400 reports. And the pattern is consistent. He opens to a marked page. Strike 147. March 23rd, 1971. Target, suspected enemy troop concentration. Intelligence estimate, 40-50 enemy combatants. Authorization granted for napalm strike. 4 F4 Phantoms, 8 canisters. Strike conducted at 15:20 hours. McKenzie looks up. Ground assessment conducted March 24th. Found 63 bodies. Weapons found 0. Military equipment found 0. Structures destroyed 18 residential buildings. Contents found in rubble, cooking implements, farming tools, children's clothing, family possessions. Assessment: strike hit village approximately 200 meters from suspected enemy position. Enemy forces had departed area before strike. Village residents were present and killed in strike. He closes the report. Official summary sent to division. Enemy troop concentration destroyed. Estimated 50 enemy casualties. No friendly casualties. Mission success. The ground unit's finding the casualties were entirely civilian was noted in their detailed report, but not included in the official summary. Morrison, the Army ground officer, speaks. General, I conducted ground assessments in 1969 and 1970. What you're describing is exactly what I experienced. We'd find civilian casualties, report them in detailed assessments, then the official summaries would classify them as enemy casualties. That was standard procedure. McKenzie. I know, and that's the problem. The procedure systematically misclassifies casualties. If a casualty occurs in a free fire zone, it's classified as enemy. Doesn't matter what the ground unit reports. Doesn't matter if they found women and children. Doesn't matter if no weapons were present. Free fire zone casualty equals enemy casualty. That's the formula. Walsh. But free fire zones are designated hostile areas. Civilians are warned to evacuate. Anyone remaining is considered enemy or enemy sympathizer. That's policy. McKenzie. That's the policy that lets us lie. We designate an area as free fire zone. We claim civilians were warned. Then we classify everyone who dies there as enemy. But the ground units are reporting something different. They're reporting that many casualties are clearly civilian, women, children, elderly, in residential structures, with family possessions, no weapons, no military equipment, no indication of military activity, but officially, they're enemy casualties because they died in a free fire zone. He pulls out more documents. I compiled examples, not just statistics, actual strikes, actual villages, actual names when we knew them. He spreads them on the table. Phuong village, February 8, 1972. Intelligence said enemy staging area. Ground assessment, 47 civilian casualties, 3 weapons found. Official classification, 47 enemy casualties. Bin Hoa Hamlet, April 12, 1971. Intelligence said supply cache. Ground assessment, 23 casualties, all elderly and children. No military materials found. Official classification, 23 enemy casualties. Phuong village, July 3, 1971. Intelligence said enemy headquarters. Ground assessment, 68 casualties. Residential structures destroyed. No military equipment found. Official classification, 68 enemy casualties. Songbi district, September 19, 1971. Intelligence said troop concentration. Ground assessment, 91 casualties including 34 children under age 10, no weapons found. Official classification, 91 enemy casualties. He keeps going. More villages, more dates, more casualties, more discrepancies between ground truth and official classification. Finally, he stops. Says, I have 400 of these. 400 detailed examples where ground assessments found primarily or entirely civilian casualties, and official classification said enemy casualties. That's not errors. That's not fog of war. That's systematic misclassification. Mitchell, the intelligence officer, speaks for the first time. General, I worked at MACV headquarters. I reviewed intelligence assessments and strike authorizations. What you're describing is accurate. The intelligence was often inadequate. We knew it was inadequate. But we authorized strikes anyway because we were under pressure to maintain operational tempo, and we used the free fire zone policy to justify classification of casualties. McKenzie looks at her. So you're confirming that MACV headquarters knew the intelligence was inadequate but authorized strikes anyway? Mitchell. Not officially, but yes. Everyone involved knew the intelligence was often 24 to 48 hours old. Enemy forces are mobile. By the time we struck, they'd often moved. But we struck anyway, and classified casualties based on where they occurred, not who they were. Foster: General, let's talk about military effectiveness. Setting aside civilian casualties for a moment, does napalm achieve military objectives against enemy forces? McKenzie: Against fixed positions, yes. Bunkers, fortifications, defensive positions. Napalm is highly effective. The heat destroys structures. The oxygen depletion makes enclosed spaces uninhabitable. Against those targets, napalm works as designed. He pauses. But that's approximately 15% of our napalm strikes, maybe 20%. The other 85% are against suspected troop concentrations, staging areas, supply caches, mobile targets. Against mobile targets, napalm effectiveness is poor. He pulls out more statistics. Average confirmed enemy casualties per napalm strike, 3.9. For comparison, average artillery strike produces 2.1 confirmed enemy casualties. Average tactical bombing with conventional explosives produces 5.3 confirmed enemy casualties. Napalm is marginally more effective than artillery, significantly less effective than conventional bombing, but napalm produces 21.8 civilian casualties per strike on average. Artillery produces 0.8 civilians per strike. Conventional bombing produces 3.2 civilians per strike. He looks around the table. Napalm is the least cost-effective weapon we're using in terms of enemy casualties produced versus civilian casualties inflicted by a significant margin. We're killing more civilians with napalm than any other weapon, and we're killing fewer enemy soldiers with napalm than we could with conventional weapons. Foster: Then why are we still using it? McKenzie: Because it's psychologically effective. The enemy fears napalm more than any other weapon we have. Ground commanders request napalm because when enemy forces hear F-4s inbound with napalm, they run, they scatter, they abandon positions. The psychological impact is significant. The tactical utility is in the terror it creates, not the casualties it produces. He leans forward. Let me be clear, napalm is a terror weapon. That's its primary function. It creates terror in enemy forces. It also creates terror in civilian populations, but its military effectiveness in terms of actual enemy casualties is poor. We use it because it scares people, not because it kills the enemy effectively. Walsh: General, are you recommending we stop using napalm? McKenzie: I'm recommending we be honest about what it does. It kills primarily civilians. It's marginally effective against military targets. Its primary utility is psychological. It creates terror. If we're going to continue using a weapon that kills 8 civilians for every enemy soldier, we should do so with accurate casualty estimates and honest reporting to Congress. He pauses. But if Congress knew the real numbers, if they knew we're killing 85,000 civilians to kill 11,000 enemy soldiers, they'd ban napalm immediately. Public support would collapse. The war would face even more opposition than it already does. So the question isn't whether napalm is effective. The question is whether we're willing to tell the truth about what it does. And for 8 years, the answer has been no. Chen, the lawyer, speaks. General, you're alleging that the military has been deliberately misrepresenting casualty data to Congress. That's a serious accusation, potentially criminal. Do you have evidence of deliberate intent to deceive? McKenzie: I have evidence that accurate data existed in Pentagon files. I have evidence that congressional testimony presented different numbers. I have evidence that the classification system was designed to produce low civilian casualty counts. Whether that constitutes deliberate deception or just bureaucratic data management, I'll let you decide. He pulls out another document. Official Congressional Testimony, 1969. Secretary of Defense testifies to Senate Armed Services Committee. Napalm strikes are conducted only against verified military targets. Civilian casualties are minimal and unavoidable in warfare. Estimated ratio of enemy to civilian casualties from napalm operations, approximately 5.1 enemy to civilian. This demonstrates the precision and effectiveness of our targeting procedures. McKenzie looks at Chen. That testimony says 5.1 enemy to civilian. My data shows 8.1 civilian to enemy. That's not just different numbers. The ratio is inverted. What the Secretary told Congress was the opposite of reality. Chen. Do you have evidence the Secretary knew the real numbers when he testified? McKenzie. I have evidence that detailed ground assessment reports were in Pentagon files. Those reports showed high civilian casualties. Whether the Secretary personally reviewed those reports before testifying, I don't know, but the data was available in the Pentagon. The Secretary's testimony contradicted that data. Someone in the chain between ground units and Congressional testimony inverted the ratio. Walsh. General, how many people have you shared this analysis with? McKenzie. My staff, the people in this room, that's all. I compiled this assessment for this committee for internal review to help determine future policy. Walsh. Has any of this been shared with press, with Congress, with anyone outside the military chain of command? McKenzie. No. This is internal assessment, for internal use, to inform decision-making. Walsh. General, this analysis is classified top secret as of this moment. Acknowledge. McKenzie. I acknowledge. Walsh. This includes all supporting documentation, all statistics, all village names, all strike reports. Everything you've presented here is classified top secret, not to be shared with anyone without explicit authorization from the Secretary of Defense. Acknowledge. McKenzie. I acknowledge. Walsh. Everyone else acknowledge around the table. Acknowledged. 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 Walsh looks at the tape recorder, reaches for it, hesitates, says, General, one more question, off the record. McKenzie. The recorder is still running. Nothing is off the record. Walsh nods, says, Why are you doing this? You could have submitted a routine assessment, said napalm is effective, mission accomplished, no concerns. You're retiring in 6 months. You could have protected your career, your reputation, your legacy. Why compile 180 pages documenting that we've been lying to Congress? Why put this on tape? Why force us to classify it and bury it? What's the point? McKenzie is quiet for a long moment then. Because someone needs to tell the truth. Someone needs to document what we did over there. Someone needs to say, we killed 85,000 civilians with napalm. We knew we were killing them. We had the data. We chose to keep using the weapon. We chose to lie about the casualties. We chose to invert the ratio in Congressional testimony. Someone needs to say that, even if you classify it, even if you bury it, even if it stays hidden for 50 years. Someone needs to say the truth, on the record. For history. He looks around the table. In 1945, after the war, people asked, how did this happen? How did educated, civilized people participate in atrocities? And the answer was, they followed orders. They trusted the system. They didn't question. They didn't document. They didn't speak up. He taps his 180-page report. I'm speaking up. I'm documenting. I'm saying we dropped napalm on villages. We killed families. We knew what we were doing. We had the data. We lied about it. That's what happened. That's the truth. And someday, when someone asks how this happened, there will be a record. There will be evidence. There will be a tape. And someone will know. At least one person tried to tell the truth. Walsh turns off the tape recorder, says, "General, we appreciate your candor. This assessment will be reviewed at the highest levels. We'll be in touch about next steps." Meeting over. Everyone leaves. Walsh keeps the tape, files it personally, labels it. Air Operations Assessment, Internal Review, Classified TS-SCI. The tape goes into storage. Building 7, Pentagon Archives, Box 4731, stored with other classified materials from 1973, stays there for 35 years. McKenzie continues his career 6 more months, retires August 1973 as Lieutenant General, final promotion before retirement, full pension, full honors, decorated service. He never speaks publicly about his assessment, never shares his data, never tells anyone outside that room what he compiled, keeps his promise, keeps it classified. He goes home to Virginia, lives quietly, plays golf, spends time with grandchildren, seems content. But his wife Margaret knows. She sees him at night, sees him wake up from dreams, dreams about villages burning, dreams about children running, dreams about reports that say one thing and summaries that say another. She asks him once, "Do you regret it, compiling that report?" He says, "No, someone needed to say it, even if it's buried, even if no one hears it for decades." The truth needed to be documented. She asks, "Do you think anyone will ever hear it?" He says, "Maybe, someday, when they declassify materials, when researchers go through old files, someone will find it, and they'll know we knew, that we had the data, that we chose to lie. That's worth something, even if I never see it." McKenzie dies in 1994, age 73, heart attack, quick, peaceful, surrounded by family. His obituary in the Washington Post says, "Lieutenant General Robert McKenzie, decorated Vietnam veteran, dies at 73, commanded air operations in the 3rd Corps, 1971-1972, awarded Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, survived by wife Margaret, 3 children, 7 grandchildren." No mention of his report, no mention of his testimony, no mention of the tape. His assessment stays buried, classified, forgotten. The Napalm campaign continues until American withdrawal in 1973. Total estimated casualties from napalm across entire Vietnam War, approximately 388,000. Vietnamese government estimates, approximately 320,000 civilian, 68,000 military. Ratio, approximately 4.7:1 civilian to military overall war. 3 Corps under Mackenzie's command had worst ratio, 8.1. But overall war ratio still heavily civilian. No one learns about Mackenzie's tape, about his analysis, about his admission, about his documentation that the US military knew it was killing primarily civilians with napalm, knew the real numbers, knew the official numbers were inverted, knew they were lying to Congress, until 2008. Dr. Jennifer Morrison is 34 years old, researcher at the National Archives, PhD in military history from Georgetown, dissertation on Vietnam War air operations. She spent 3 years cataloguing recently declassified Vietnam materials. Most of it is routine, mission reports, logistical assessments, personnel records, boring but necessary work, documenting history, making it accessible. March 2008, Morrison is working through boxes from Pentagon Archives, Building 7, materials from 1973, box after box of routine paperwork. Then she finds box 4731, labeled Air Operations Training Materials, 1973. She opens it. Inside, 37 audio cassette tapes. Some are training lectures, some are mission briefings, some are personnel evaluations, standard materials. But one tape is different, labeled only Internal Review 03-15-73. Morrison loads it into her tape player, hits play, hears static. Then Walsh's voice. March 15th, 1973. 1400 hours. Internal Assessment of Napalm Operations Effectiveness, 1971-1972. General McKenzie presiding. She keeps listening, hears McKenzie's voice. Napalm is a terror weapon that occasionally kills enemy soldiers. She hears the numbers. 8.1 civilian to military. 85,000 civilians. Systematic misclassification. Deliberate misrepresentation to Congress. She listens to the entire 47 minutes, then sits there, stunned. She rewinds, listens again, takes notes, documents everything. Then she checks the classification marking on the tape and the box. The tape was marked top secret, but the box was declassified in routine 2007 declassification. Nobody reviewed the individual tapes. They just declassified the entire box as a batch. Standard procedure for materials over 30 years old. The tape is now legally declassified, available for research. Public domain. Morrison contacts her supervisor, Dr. Richard Walsh, no relation to Colonel Walsh, says, "I found something significant. You need to hear this." They listen together. When it's over, Walsh says, "This is explosive. We need to verify authenticity before we do anything with it." Verification takes 6 months. Voice analysis confirms recordings match known recordings of McKenzie Pentagon personnel records, confirm all 6 men were in Washington, D.C. on March 15, 1973. Handwriting analysis on tape label matches. Colonel James Walsh's signature classification markings are authentic. Box 4731 records show it came from Pentagon, Building 7 archives. Declassification stamps are authentic. The tape is real. The admission is real. General McKenzie really did say the US military killed 85,000 civilians with napalm. Really did say they were lying to Congress about it. Really did document 8.1 civilian to military casualty ratio, September 2008. Morrison contacts McKenzie's family, asks if they knew about the tape. Margaret McKenzie, now 87, says, "Bob told me he made a report, said he documented the truth, said it would be classified, said maybe someday someone would find it. He never told me specifics, just said he told them what napalm really did." Is that what's on the tape? Morrison: "Yes. He documented that napalm killed primarily civilians, that the military knew, that they misreported to Congress. He was very specific, very detailed. He named villages, cited statistics, built a comprehensive case." Margaret: "And they buried it?" Morrison: "Yes, for 35 years. Margaret: "But you found it?" Morrison: "Yes." Margaret is quiet. Then, "Bob would want it public. He said someone needed to tell the truth. He documented it so someday people would know. If it's declassified now, publish it. Let people hear what he said." December 2008. Morrison publishes article in Journal of Military History. The McKenzie tape, evidence of systematic casualty misreporting in Vietnam napalm operations, 1965-1973. The article includes full transcript of the tape, McKenzie's background and credentials, analysis of his statistical methodology, comparison with other casualty estimates, discussion of casualty classification system. He described legal and ethical implications. The article notes, General McKenzie's assessment indicates US military leadership had detailed knowledge of high civilian casualty rates from napalm operations, but presented inverted casualty ratios to Congress. This suggests systematic misrepresentation of data that, if accurate, would constitute a profound breach of congressional oversight. The reaction is immediate and explosive. Veterans groups split. Some say Morrison is dishonoring veterans. Some say McKenzie was right and they always knew it. Some say the tape must be fabricated or taken out of context. Anti-war groups cite it as definitive proof of war crimes, demand investigations, demand prosecutions, demand accountability. The Pentagon issues careful statement: the tape is authentic. However, General McKenzie's assessment represented his personal analysis based on data available to him in 1973. Official casualty figures were compiled using comprehensive intelligence from multiple sources and remain the most accurate estimates available. General McKenzie's methodology, while thorough, did not have access to all intelligence sources and may have reached conclusions not fully supported by complete data. Translation: the tape is real. McKenzie's numbers are probably wrong. Official numbers are right. Morrison responds publicly. General McKenzie's analysis was based on 1,963 ground unit reports, actual body counts conducted by soldiers who walked the strike zones. The Pentagon is saying their intelligence estimates are more accurate than actual body counts. That strains credibility. January 2009. Congressional hearings begin. House Armed Services Committee reviews the tape, reviews McKenzie's methodology, reviews the casualty classification system he described. 3 weeks of hearings, 23 witnesses, veterans, historians, statistical analysts, legal experts, Vietnamese officials. Key findings: McKenzie's tape is authentic and was properly declassified. His statistical methodology appears sound based on available ground assessment data. The casualty classification system he described was official policy. Casualties in free fire zones were classified as enemy regardless of civilian indicators. Ground unit reports consistently documented civilian casualties that were classified as enemy in official summaries. Congressional testimony in 1969-1971 reported casualty ratios that significantly differed from ground unit data. Whether this constitutes deliberate deception or bureaucratic error in data aggregation cannot be definitively determined. Conclusion: General McKenzie's assessment that napalm operations produced approximately 8.1 civilian to military casualty ratio appears supported by available ground unit reports. Official casualty figures provided to Congress during the Vietnam War were based on classification methodologies that did not fully account for ground unit observations of civilian casualties. While this may represent bureaucratic processes rather than deliberate deception, the effect was systematic underreporting of civilian casualties to Congress and the American people. Translation: McKenzie was probably right. The military probably did misreport. Whether it was on purpose, we won't say definitively. But the numbers were wrong. March 2009. 3 former officers who served in Vietnam come forward. All conducted ground assessments. All confirm McKenzie's description. Lieutenant Colonel James Bradley, retired, 68. I conducted post-strike assessments from 1970 and 1971. What General McKenzie describes is exactly what I experienced. We'd find primarily civilian casualties, women, children, elderly, people in residential areas with no military equipment. We'd report all of that in our detailed assessments. Then, the official summaries would classify them as enemy casualties because they died in free fire zones. That was standard procedure. Everyone involved knew the official numbers didn't reflect ground reality. Colonel Michael Kramer, retired, 71. The 8:1 ratio sounds right to me, maybe even conservative. I'd estimate 9.1 or 10.1 in some operations I witnessed. Napalm doesn't discriminate. It burns everything in a 50-meter radius. If there are civilians anywhere near the target, and there almost always were, they burn. We all knew it, but officially, they were enemy casualties. That's how the system worked. Major Sarah Chen, retired, 64. I worked in intelligence analysis at MACV headquarters. I reviewed strike data and casualty reports. General McKenzie's numbers match what I saw internally. We were killing far more civilians than combatants with napalm. Everyone involved knew it, but the classification system produced different numbers for external reporting, numbers that made operations look more effective and less problematic. Those were the numbers Congress saw. The real numbers stayed in detailed reports that most people never read. Their testimony corroborates McKenzie. Multiple independent sources saying the same thing. The system classified civilian casualties as enemy. The official numbers were wrong. Everyone knew. May 2012. Vietnamese government releases war casualty data, compiled from hospital records, village documentation, family testimonies. Massive dataset, decades in compilation. For 3 Corps, 1971-1972 period, McKenzie analysed estimated civilian casualties from napalm, 78,000, 91,000, estimated military casualties from napalm, 9,000, 13,000 ratio, approximately 7.1 to 9.1 civilian to military. McKenzie estimated 8.1. Vietnamese data shows 7.1 to 9.1. His numbers fall right in the middle. His estimate was accurate. The Vietnamese data validates McKenzie's analysis. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't cherry-picking. He was right. The real ratio was approximately 8.1 civilian to military, just like he said on the tape. August 2015. Pentagon releases additional declassified materials, includes McKenzie's full 180-page report. The complete assessment he referenced during the tape recording, the report that was classified for 42 years.
The report contains everything he described, strike-by-strike analysis of all 2,847 operations, full text of 400 ground assessment reports he reviewed, village names and coordinates, casualty counts and classifications, ground observation versus official summary, statistical analysis of effectiveness, napalm versus other weapons, cost-benefit analysis, enemy casualties versus civilian casualties versus operational costs, comparative analysis, what intelligence said versus what ground units found, photographs from ground assessments showing civilian casualties, medical reports from Vietnamese hospitals, refugee testimonies, pilot debriefs describing what they observed. The report's final recommendation: napalm operations should be limited to verified fixed military targets where civilian presence is minimal and can be confirmed absent.
Current employment against suspected mobile targets produces unacceptable civilian casualty rates that undermine strategic objectives and erode moral justification for operations. Recommend immediate policy change restricting napalm use to verified fixed targets only. McKenzie recommended restricting napalm in 1972, based on comprehensive data showing it killed primarily civilians. His recommendation was classified, ignored. Napalm operations continued unchanged until US withdrawal. The 180-page report includes specific examples McKenzie cited on tape, the villages he named, the dates, the casualty counts, all documented with grid coordinates, ground unit reports, photographs. Tan Phuong, 47 civilian casualties, 3 weapons found, classified as 47 enemy casualties. Bin Hoa, 23 casualties, all elderly and children, no weapons found, classified as 23 enemy casualties. Phuong, 68 casualties, residential structures, no military equipment, classified as 68 enemy casualties. Song, B, 91 casualties, including 34 children under age 10, no weapons, classified as 91 enemy casualties. Page after page, village after village, Strike after strike, the pattern consistent. Ground units report civilian casualties. Official summaries classify as enemy. Every time. The report proves Mackenzie's tape wasn't just his opinion, it was comprehensive documentation based on 1,963 ground assessments, verified with medical records, cross-checked with refugee testimony, corroborated with pilot observations. The most thorough analysis of napalm effectiveness ever compiled, and it was buried for 42 years. September 2018. Dr. Morrison publishes book, The Weapon We Couldn't Admit, Napalm.
Civilian casualties and the numbers the Pentagon hid. The book includes complete transcript of Mackenzie's tape, full reproduction of his 180-page report, analysis of casualty classification system, comparison of congressional testimony with internal data, Vietnamese casualty documentation, veteran testimonies, photographs from ground assessments, legal analysis of misrepresentation to Congress. The book's thesis: US military had comprehensive evidence that napalm killed primarily civilians, documented that evidence internally, presented inverted numbers externally to Congress, continued operations for 8 years while hiding true casualty data. Key revelation: Pentagon officials testified to Congress multiple times that napalm produced 5.1 enemy to civilian casualties. But Mackenzie's data, available internally, showed 8.1 civilian to enemy casualties. The numbers weren't just wrong, they were inverted, deliberately presented in a way that made napalm seem effective against military targets and minimal against civilians, when reality was opposite. The book includes direct comparison, Congressional testimony, 1969. Napalm strikes are highly effective against enemy concentrations. Estimated casualty ratio: 5 enemy casualties for every 1 civilian casualty. This demonstrates precision targeting. Mackenzie's data, 1971-1972. Actual casualty ratio: 8 civilian casualties for every 1 enemy casualty. Demonstrates napalm primarily kills civilians, not enemy forces. The inversion is documented, proven, undeniable. November 2020. Additional Pentagon tape surface.
Found by researchers going through newly declassified materials, more internal meetings, more assessments, more discussions about napalm casualties. One tape from May 1971, 2 years before Mackenzie's recording, includes Colonel James Walsh, same person who recorded Mackenzie, discussing casualty reports with staff. Walsh: "We're getting ground reports showing high civilian casualties from napalm operations. The ratio appears to be approximately 7 or 8 to 1, civilian to military. But official summaries are classifying most casualties as enemy because they occurred in free fire zones. If the real numbers become public, Congress will shut down the napalm program immediately."
We need to maintain the current classification methodology. Staff officer: "Can we improve targeting to reduce civilian casualties?" Walsh: "Not without reducing operational tempo. Napalm is area effect. It spreads. If civilians are within 50 meters of target, and they usually are, they're going to be casualties. That's inherent to the weapon. We can't make it more discriminate." Staff officer: "So what do we do?" Walsh: "We maintain current procedures. Free fire zone casualties are classified as enemy. Detailed ground reports stay at unit level. Official summaries use the classification system. Congress sees the summaries. The system works as long as detailed reports don't reach congressional oversight." This 1971 tape proves Pentagon officials knew about the classification problem before Mackenzie's assessment.
Knew the real casualty ratios, knew they were presenting different numbers to Congress, made conscious decision to maintain the system rather than fix it or disclose it. February 2023, 50 years after Mackenzie's tape, PBS produces documentary The General's Confession, What the Pentagon Knew About Napalm. The documentary includes full audio of Mackenzie's tape with transcript interviews with Morrison and researchers, veteran testimonies confirming his data, Vietnamese survivors describing napalm strikes, analysis of classification system, Congressional testimony versus internal data comparison, legal experts discussing implications, archival footage and photographs. The documentary's conclusion: US military systematically misrepresented napalm casualties to Congress throughout Vietnam War. The misrepresentation was documented by General McKenzie in 1973. His evidence was classified and buried. When evidence finally emerged 35 years later, it proved what he said was accurate. Napalm killed approximately 8.1 civilian to military, and military leadership knew it while reporting opposite ratios to Congress. The documentary ends with Margaret McKenzie, now 102 years old, being interviewed at her home in Virginia. Interviewer: "Your husband documented this in 1973. He was right. The evidence proves it. How do you feel knowing that his truth was buried for 35 years but finally came out?" Margaret: "Bob said someone needed to tell the truth, even if it got buried, even if no one heard it for decades. He said the truth needed to be documented for history, so someday people would know what really happened." She pauses, looks at a photograph of her husband on the wall, continues, "He died in 1994. Never saw his tape released, never saw his report published, never saw his numbers validated, but he knew. He knew someday it would come out. He said, 'The tape is running, the record exists, someday someone will hear it, and they'll know we knew, they'll know we had the data, they'll know we lied about it. That's worth something, even if I never see it.'" She looks back at the camera. He was right. It took 35 years, but the truth came out. People know now. His tape proved it. That's what he wanted. Not vindication for himself, just truth for history. The tape of Mackenzie's 1973 assessment is now housed at the National Archives, available to any researcher, any citizen, anyone who wants to hear what a US general said about napalm when he thought only 6 people would hear it. You can listen to his voice, hear him say, "Napalm is a terror weapon that occasionally kills enemy soldiers. The ratio is approximately 8.1 civilian to military, and everyone in this room knows it. We've known it for years, and we've been lying about it to Congress since 1965. That's the secret tape. That's the general's admission. That's what he said about what napalm really did. Not a precision weapon, not effective against military targets. A terror weapon that killed primarily civilians at 8:1 ratio, and the military knew it, documented it internally, presented inverted numbers externally for 8 years. McKenzie documented the truth in 1973. Tape proved it in 2008. Vietnamese data confirmed it in 2012. Additional tapes corroborated it in 2020. 50 years of evidence accumulating, all proving the same thing. The US military knew what napalm really did, knew who it really killed, had comprehensive data, chose to hide it, chose to present opposite numbers to Congress, chose to continue operations while knowing the truth. That's what the secret tape reveals. That's what General McKenzie admitted. That's what stayed hidden for 35 years until a researcher found it in a mislabeled box. The truth was documented, the tape was running, the record existed, and eventually, finally, someone heard it. And now everyone knows what the general said about what napalm really did.